Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Halo Chronicle. This video is part 11 in my First Strike series. If you've not seen the previous parts, I recommend that you check those videos out before watching today's video. A link will be provided in the description below. Last week, we discussed the Master Chief's mission to find Captain Keyes. Keyes and a small team of Marines journeyed to a rumored Covenant weapons cache in a swampy region of Halo's surface. Sometime after making landfall, contact with Keyes' team was cut off. The Master Chief would journey to this facility to investigate what happened to Keyes and attempt to save the captain from an unknown threat. Upon arriving to the swamp, the Master Chief would find several squads of Covenant soldiers. Rather than attempting to engage the Spartan, they were fleeing. Chief would eventually find the structure they were fleeing from and make his way inside. Inside, he would engage with several Covenant teams that had a little bit more courage. After clearing the way, the Chief would encounter a Marine that was experiencing a mental breakdown. Chief attempted to calm down the erratic Marine, but nothing worked. He would be forced to leave the Marine behind and continue his search for Captain Keyes. Finally, the Chief would find a locked door with a UNSC lock-picking device attached to it. Believing that Keyes may have been there, the Chief activated the door and caught a badly mangled body that had fallen through. He would enter the chamber and find a helmet with a mission recorder attached to it. He would remove the helmet's data chip and insert it into his Mjolnir suit. He would watch a video that recounted Keyes' journey through the facility. He would then see an unknown group of spider-like alien creatures attack the captain and his team. The recording would abruptly end. After which, the Chief would be attacked by those very same creatures. Chief would fight his way through the chamber and encounter a different variant of these creatures. This variant had assumed control of an elite's body and had significantly decayed the former Covenant soldier. These forms would be called combat forms. Chief would fend off many waves of these combat forms and make his way out of the facility. He pushed his way through a swampy jungle and reached the dead end at the base of a tower. While fending off more waves of the horribly deformed creatures, the Chief was rescued by several floating constructs equipped with lasers. These constructs would be called Sentinels. He would then be introduced to a large floating blue construct called 343 Guilty Spark. Spark would state that he needed the Spartans' help immediately. They would then be teleported away from this haunting facility. That is going to complete last week's recap. Let's jump into today's material. The Master Chief would rematerialize in a large cylindrical-shaped chamber with multiple floors. There he would be greeted once again by 343 Guilty Spark. Spark would explain that he needed the Chief's help to activate Halo's defenses and destroy the Flood. With that small explanation, Chief was finally able to put a name to the creatures that had attacked him during his search for Captain Keyes. 343 Guilty Spark would then state that in order to activate Halo's defenses, they would need to retrieve an object called the Activation Index from the top of this structure. This structure would be called the Library. To do so, the Chief would need to clear and climb 4 floors that were filled with flood-infested bodies. The Master Chief would begin his long trek to the top of the facility by being introduced to another Flood form. When turning a corner, the Master Chief was introduced to a Flood form that had a large bubble-shaped body and walked on 2 legs. When Chief approached, the bubble would explode and release several Flood pod infectors. This new form would be called a Flood carrier form. The Chief would begin engaging and cutting his way through the large group of Flood forces that crowded around him while 343 Guilty Spark watched. Meanwhile, on another part of the ring, Lieutenant Melissa McKay laid a trap for the Covenant. She had the wreckage of Pelican Charlie 217 brought into a remote area outside of Alpha Base. She then had several UNSC soldiers play dead in a field around the downed Pelican. As she planned, Covenant forces would begin to move in to scavenge the UNSC ship. As they touched down, McKay ordered her forces to engage. A brutal firefight would begin. To the surprise of both sides, a new threat would join the fray. Flood forces would break through the ground and begin attacking both sides. McKay was shocked by this new development. Some of her forces were caught off guard and consumed by the Flood. McKay would reorganize her forces and begin addressing the new threat. Suddenly, McKay would be attacked by a flood combat form. She would sidestep the beast, and her forces would capture it. She would read the dog tag off of its chest and find that this combat form was Private Wallace Jenkins. Jenkins was attacked by the flood while he was on a mission with Captain Keyes. A flood pod infector attached itself to Jenkins, but the parasite was too weak to completely take over his whole body. This left Jenkins with some limited motor function. Eventually, at a great cost, the UNSC forces would win the battle. In the end, more than half of McKay's platoon was dead. For the first time since landing on Halo's surface, McKay began to lose hope that the UNSC forces trapped on this installation would survive and return home. She would go into a depression and begin to lose faith in her cause. The Master Chief slowly made his way through the Halo's facility known as the library. He would be forced to clear out several rooms that were filled with flood-infested bodies. On several occasions, Spark would ask the Chief to stay put in a room while he moved to a different part of the facility. Chief would begin to grow resentful of the Monitor's lack of guidance. To make matters worse, on several occasions, 343 Guilty Spark would proudly boast that he was a genius. The Chief would also be forced to take several maintenance tunnels to advance through the facility. These tunnels would also be filled with flood-infected bodies, including the new flood carrier forms. On more than one occasion, the Chief would be forced to backtrack in an effort to lure the flood away and give him more room to work with. Finally, the Master Chief would reach the top floor. He would reach a bridge that would take him to the center of the facility. There, he would step on a platform that would act as an elevator. The platform would quickly lower to the bottom of the facility and reveal the Index's housing. The Chief would remove the T-shaped device from its housing, and Spark would immediately take it from him. 343 Guilty Spark would state that this was standard protocol. The Monitor would then engage Halo's transportation system and teleport them to Halo's control room. 343 Guilty Spark would then return the Index to the Master Chief and advise him to insert it into Halo's main control console. Chief would locate the port and insert the Index. Systems across the installation would begin to rev up, but suddenly they would power back down. Then, Cortana would make her presence known. Cortana would scold the Master Chief for what he was about to do. A confused Chief would try to explain that the Monitor was an ally, but Cortana would refute this claim. Cortana stated activating Halo's defenses would actually fire a pulse throughout the galaxy that would destroy all sentient life, thus cutting off the Flood's food supply. Chief looked to Spark to confirm this, and to his dismay, the Monitor would indeed confirm Halo's true purpose. Chief immediately moved into a defensive position around Cortana. Cortana would remove the Index's activation code and absorb it into her systems. Chief then removed Cortana's memory crystal and reloaded it into the back of his Mjolnir helmet. 343 Guilty Spark became enraged and stated if the Master Chief was unwilling to do what was necessary, he would find someone else who would. He then ordered his sentinels to engage the Chief. The Master Chief would take out the hovering robotic drones and make his way out of Halo's control room. He would reach the icy canyon he originally crossed to get to Halo's control facility. While attempting to make a break for it, the Chief would re-engage with hundreds of Covenant soldiers. While the Chief attempted to make his escape, Cortana would formulate a plan. She stated that the only way to ensure Halo was not used would be to destroy it. The best way to do that would be to overload the crashed Pillar of Autumn's reactors. The resulting explosion would fracture and destroy Halo. Cortana stated that she would need Captain Keyes' neural implant codes to trigger the reactor overload, but before they could seek out the captain, they would need to make sure that Spark could not find another way to fire the installation. Cortana stated that there were 3 energy relay stations in this series of canyons. She stated that if these energy relay stations were overloaded, Halo would be unable to fire until Spark found time to repair them. The Chief commandeered a Banshee and made his way through several canyons. He would reach all 3 relay stations, and using his armor's shields, he would overload each station. the Chief successfully damaged Halo and bought the UNSC time to destroy the installation. Cortana stated that they did not have time to wait for transport. Using her new intimate knowledge of Halo's systems, she tapped into the transportation grid. Using a charge from the Chief's shields, she activated the grid, and in a bright light, the Master Chief was once again teleported. That is going to complete today's installment of this story, but before I leave you, let's talk about some interesting bits of lore tied to today's material. The Master Chief is not the first human that 343 Guilty Spark would recruit to retrieve the Index. Staff Sergeant Marvin Mabudo was the first human tasked with retrieving the Index. The Staff Sergeant impressively made it to the 3rd floor of the library before succumbing to the flood. Chief would find Marvin's remains and give the Staff Sergeant a eulogy of sorts. He would say, "I didn't know you, Sarge, but I sure as hell wish I did. You must have been one hard-ass son of a bitch." Upon being captured and returned to Alpha Base, the flood-infested Private Jenkins would attempt to communicate with his UNSC squad mates. He would request to see his reflection in a mirror. Upon seeing the horror that had become his body, Jenkins would attempt to take his life 3 times, but the soldiers stationed in the brig would stop him on each occasion. While in Halo's control room with the Master Chief, 343 Guilty Spark would display signs of rampancy. He would ask the Chief why he wouldn't fire the Halo array when he had already done it before. Spark is confusing the Master Chief with the ISO Didact during this time. The Forerunner known as the ISO Didact is the one who originally fired the Halo array 100,000 years before these events. Thank you for watching today's video. If you've enjoyed today's video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for future content. Next week's episode will cover the Master Chief's journey to find Captain Keyes, Zuka's last chance at revenge, and the Pillar of Autumn's reactor explosion. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.